TV. I'm Myrah, and this is BIMS Bites. Today we'll be biting into polar marine science. So polar marine science happens at the poles, and we're studying these areas because they're warming at 4 times the global average rate, and this is creating significant changes. It also means that these waters are ice-free for longer, and so we have the ability to access them more. With all these changes and discoveries, it's a really exciting time to be studying polar marine science. So I figured I'd take you in the field with me. Our first stop is Antarctica. So Antarctica is a unique place to study in the world because it has no permanent human civilization that's ever lived there. And so human influence is felt a lot less than in other waters. It's very hard to get to. And so we hitched a ride on a tourism vessel called the Ocean Endeavor to be able to go and study in these waters. This was part of Project Colossal, a project aimed at filming the colossal squid in its natural habitat for the first time in history. And to do that, we kind of followed a couple clues. Not much is known about the colossal squid, but we know it likes to live in deep waters of 1,000 meters or more, and it loves krill. So krill are the foundational species of the Antarctic food web. Everything eats and depends on krill. It is the main food source. And so if krill disappear, most of these other animals will disappear. But we know that where there's krill, there's likely a predator nearby. The other area we study is the Arctic. And this is a really great place to study because there's people. And so the Arctic is the homeland of Inuit in Greenland, Alaska, Russia, and northern Canada. So I study in northern Canada. And the food web here is a lot more diversified, but it also includes humans. There's still an active part of the food web by hunting and fishing to this day. But things don't just hinge on krill. We have a lot more trophic levels within the food web, which make it different than Antarctica. So here we use vessels from local government and communities. This one is from our parks agency, Parks Canada, called the RV David Thompson. It's a research vessel. But we also use local boats. And in the winter, we get on a snowmobile and we can drive directly on the sea ice to get to our sample sites. So this is part of my master's work at the Marine Institute of Memorial University, and I am in the 40 Oceans Lab. So why do we go to such great lengths to study these polar marine habitats? And the answer for me is benthos. So benthos are the animals that live on the bottom of the ocean, and oftentimes they're slow growing and don't really move so much, but they provide so much to the environment. They will filter feed, they'll cycle nutrients to higher trophic levels, and they'll provide habitat and food to other organisms in these areas. So not everywhere looks as lush. Some areas look a little more barren, but still in this image, there's at least 6 species. And if you can spot more, definitely let me know. When we sample in these areas and study these areas, the first thing we'll do is scan the seafloor. Then we'll take videos to see what's actually growing there, and we'll combine everything using coding and AI into a final map. So step 1, we scan the seafloor using a multi-beam echo sounder. So this is a device that's under the boat, and I really like this video from NOAA, which shows that the sonar goes all the way down, hits the bottom of the seafloor, and the return signal is what we then use to create these 3D renderings of what the seafloor looks like. So think of it kind of like a bat signal. The same way that we can have the topography on land, in the water we have bathymetry, which tells us the different depths that we're seeing in an area. And bathymetry is important because we can derive more variables from it. So we can know the slope under the water. We can know which way the slope is facing, how curved it is, its relative position to other slopes, and how variable the terrain is. And these are clues that can point us to where certain benthos might be. So, for example, we know anemones love steep slopes because they're filter feeders, and these steep slopes allow them to lean into the current and get more food. The other layer of data that we get from the echo sounder is backscatter. So backscatter tells us about the texture of the seafloor. So a darker area is going to be softer because more of the sonar got absorbed, and a lighter area is going to be harder substrate like bedrock because more of the sonar bounces back. So this is also an important clue for where benthos are. For example, coral like a harder bottom, especially in the Arctic, where they're soft corals. They like a hard substrate to latch onto and grow for stability. So the next step, once we know what the seafloor looks like, is to film the benthos. And although scuba is possible, the areas we sample are too deep, so we use what's called a remote operated vehicle, or ROV for short. And these can range from the size of a car all the way down to the size of a water bottle or even smaller. So in this case, this is the size of a thermos, and we have it attached to a tether, which connects to our laptop on board the vessel so that we can have a live feed of what's happening under the boat as we're sampling. In the winter, we can stand directly on the sea ice and deploy our ROV down from there and kind of pilot it around in the water. So the camera is in the sea ice hole that we cut there, and it connects to our handheld device, which has a screen for live viewing. And this one's my favorite because it's like playing a video game and we get to see in real time what's going on. So when we are deploying these cameras, it's one of the best parts because in a lot of cases, it's the first time we're seeing the seafloor in these areas, and we're able to create these baseline studies of what is actually living on the bottom of these Arctic and Antarctic regions. In a lot of cases, we are learning about new species or unknown species to us. And so there's a lot of collaboration happening where people are able to share which species they're able to identify. So it's kind of like amassing this catalog of all these cold water species that we're only just now beginning to document. So once we get in the lab, our job is to go frame by frame and label each organism. So in this case, we'll say that this is a tube anemone and this is a brittle star. Not every species is able to be identified to a low taxonomic level. Sometimes all we can say is, well, that's a sponge, because without DNA, we can't for certain know the exact species, but we can know maybe the family or the genus. So once we have all this information, we combine it into a map. The bathymetry and the backscatter and all the derivatives that we got, like slope or curvature, are layered with the benthic assemblages or the groups of benthos that we know are living in certain areas. And we code that to create a wider map than what we sampled using predictions to finally have our color-coded habitat map. And so this map will show us by color which group of benthos live where. And so these maps are then handed to local communities and governments for them to translate these findings into action. So habitat maps are really important because they can translate to environmental policies or fisheries planning. We can detect earlier on if species ranges are shifting or if there's an invasive species or a vulnerable species that we should be aware of. We can discover new things, look at biodiversity patterns, and do what we're doing now, outreach, sharing these amazing benthic animals with the world. And so this work is, in the grand scheme of things, aimed at making sure that we can ensure the health and survival of these environments for future generations. And all this work would not be possible without all these amazing partners, from academia to government to nonprofit sector. And so thank you to all these amazing partners. And if you are curious about the work we're doing and you want to know more, please reach out to me at these links. And if you want more content like this, please follow and subscribe BIMS. They have amazing stuff. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys out there. Bye.